Hi everybody. I thought I would switch for chapter 4 away from Radio Phoenix because I realized I'm not going to be a whole heck of a lot of help if I'm always saying, well, there's no staff, so I can't talk to you about what the staff ought to be doing. The organization that you are looking at now is the Asian Pacific Community in Action Organization. And this is an organization in Phoenix that we are not studying today. It's from last semester as Radio Phoenix was. And what they basically do is two things. They help Pacific Islanders, Asian Pacific Islanders, settle into Phoenix, and they do all kinds of support things. And they also put on a lot of community education events. I believe that what you are looking at right now is a picture of from their last anniversary gala, which is their fundraiser, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Chapter 4, which is all about creating a positive volunteer climate. So basically, that requires that the people at the top, in other words, your board and your top level management, as well as the people at the bottom, and by that I mean your staff, whatever their job is, and they're not really at the bottom except if you want to think of a hierarchical flow chart, organization chart. But you need everybody to really understand, why are we bringing in volunteers? Because it's going to take time and resources, and there's going to be some people floating around, and everybody needs to understand what they're doing there and what their role and their responsibilities and actually even their authority is. And when I say that you have to be committed to the fact that you'll need resources, people are going to spend time with these volunteers, whether it's in training or working side by side or orientation, and there may in fact be money involved. It depends on the organization. Now, with this particular organization, I don't believe there's anything like money for fingerprinting, but if your organization deals with kids, then absolutely most of the volunteers are going to have to be fingerprinted and so forth. And then no matter what kind of organization, you may want to do some sort of volunteer appreciation, whether that's a luncheon or some other kind of event or little gifts at the end of the year, whatever. You're still going to have expenses, time cost of people's time, and real money cost. Maybe they need a laptop to work on when they're there, a space in the office, which might require bigger space. I don't know, but it will depend entirely on your particular organization. So first of all, because you're going to have to justify these costs and they're going to be in the budget somehow, the board needs to feel good about this. And so the organization's job is to show their board of directors how enlarging or improving their volunteer program is going to help the organization get to its mission more fully. And so that is how you would think about whether or not the board knows. Has the board been brought in? Does the board understand this piece of the program and how important it is or could be toward reaching the mission? Now with the staff, it's a little bit different. Sometimes staff have concerns. They're afraid that if the volunteers do their jobs really well, that staff jobs may disappear. That is almost never the case. Although we've seen an organization that does run entirely by volunteers. They often start that way, but they rarely go in that direction from fully paid to fully volunteer. They often go from fully volunteer the other direction to having paid staff. But other kinds of fears that the staff might have are that because volunteers aren't paid, they won't be interested enough in coming. They won't have enough incentive to show up all the time, that they may sometimes leave the organization in the lurch. Another concern is that volunteers may not be adequately trained or have the right expertise to do a job, and that a staff person might need to redo it, or even that doing it wrong the first time would cause a client or somebody a real problem. How in the world can you get staff past those fears? Well, I think you need to start by listening to those fears. So one thing you're going to look for in the survey and other material that you have from your client is, have they actually gotten the staff together to talk about the value of the volunteers and what the volunteers might be concerned about? Once you hear what the staff might be concerned about, once you hear the staff concerns, then you can address them. For example, if they're worried about them not having the right training, the staff can work together to figure out what that training ought to be and even help deliver it, which actually is a good thing at a couple of levels because it then helps the staff and the volunteers get to know each other in terms of that training and orientation work. In terms of helping staff not be afraid, by the way, that noise, if you can hear it in the background, are my dogs wrestling on the floor. If it gets bad enough, I have a squirt bottle somewhere, and I can just take care of it. Shush, everybody. Sorry, guys. So basically, the way that you ensure that volunteers show up when they're supposed to and don't leave you in the lurch has a lot to do with a couple of things like orientation and how serious you talk to the volunteer about this in the beginning. So just to use this organization as an example, sometimes organizations don't even actually recognize what is causing their problem. The Asian Pacific community came to us last year and said that they use a bunch of volunteers to serve food in their kitchens. Stop it, guys. To Asian community that would come in, and it's partially social and it's partially just to help people get settled. But what was really great about these volunteers is they were people who are already settled in the community, and it was really good for the newcomers to hear from the people who are settled that, you know, all the glitches and bumps of moving to a new culture and a new home would eventually be overcome, and this was very good for them. But what Asian Pacific community was discovering was that they had a lot of people who volunteered to come, but then some of them wouldn't show up, and they were pretty unreliable. They were really thinking, and this is the point that I'm trying to make, they had an idea in their mind about what was causing it. They thought that it was because they made reminder calls to everybody a whole week in advance, and they felt like if they could make the reminder call the day in advance, it might make a difference. I really didn't think that was the problem. It might be, and it's fine if they want to make their reminder calls a little bit later in the week. But when I stopped to think about it, I thought, well, I don't think they had a very effective conversation about this, if at all, during their orientation. So in this case, helping the staff feel comfortable that the future volunteers would show up on time probably required them to change up their orientation. It required them to let the volunteers know exactly what problems it would cause for the staff if they weren't there, but also to let them, on the flip side, that's the negative, to let them understand just how important it was to the folks who were showing up for dinner for them to have this interface with the people who have already been settled. And by doing that, they are helping them see how much they contribute to the mission of the Asian Pacific folk. So in other words, the point is there is something that could be done for each of these concerns that the staff might have. They can participate in the training. They can think about how to orient the volunteers when they come in so that they understand the seriousness and importance of their being there. And actually, I think things like job interviews and job descriptions also help, because if the organization takes the volunteers very seriously, the volunteers will take their jobs very seriously. Okay, so that means, you know, getting a good solid job description, which is we'll talk about a couple chapters from now, and maybe even to the extent that there's flexibility, letting the volunteer themselves help craft some of the particulars of their job duties, because that will help them stay more motivated and feel more invested. So here's my quick list of the things that you should be looking for in your own organization. Do they have accurate job descriptions so that a potential volunteer will know whether it's a good match or fit for themselves and be most likely to want to be there? Do they do job interviews? Even though they're volunteering, it sets the tone. It tells the volunteer that this is a serious position, we take it seriously, and we're relying on you. And it also gives both the volunteer and the staff a chance to get to know each other and feel out whether there's a fit before either side commits. Then be picky about who gets volunteer jobs. If you've been living without a volunteer in a role until now, then you should, if you can't find the right person just yet, don't put the first person who comes along if they don't seem to fit. You'll be sorry later. You'll just be replacing them when that's not a good match. Be willing to take the time to find the right person. And think about where you might go to get just that right person. And especially this also goes to if you need a person with a certain experience. Where would you go, for example, to find CPAs? I would probably go to the CPA or bookkeeping associations, the professional associations. Where would you go if what you were trying to find were people to be counselors at a sports camp in the summer? I'd probably go to talk to the coaches association in town, and I also might go to the colleges to talk to their athletes in the athletic department. Often those athletes would like to do that kind of thing in the summer. In other words, not only wait for the fit to come, but think about where you can go to recruit that fit. Set goals for each volunteer position. Share those goals with the volunteers, because when they make a goal, you're able to say, look what you did, you've reached your first goal. They feel great, you feel great that they're actually going to come through. And if they don't meet the goal consistently over and over, then you kind of have a way to say to them, look, we don't think this is a good fit. We could talk about a better fit, or maybe this organization isn't even for you. But seeing that they weren't able to reach those goals is a measurement, a bar for you, both for the positive and for the negative. And then finally, you want to create opportunities for the volunteers and the staff to interact and get to know each other better, and possibly to work together and to play together, because that helps both groups feel very good about each other. It helps the staff feel great about the volunteers because they become people they know and feel comfortable around, and get to know whether or not they feel they can trust them, and when they can, things get better on the staff side. And it also makes your volunteers feel very much more integrated into the work of the organization. So those are the things you should be looking for when you are looking at what your client is doing regarding Chapter 4. And again, if you can't find that information in the survey, then you might want to ask some additional questions. Alrighty, that's Chapter 4.